Hello, it's Truebrilliance, and in this video I'm going to talk about the zodiac sign of Gemini. So Gemini is the third sign of the zodiac. It's ruled by Mercury, which is the planet of communication and sending messages. And also is the sign of the intellect and the mind. Geminis very much live in their minds. You can just kind of see a halo of buzzing energy going on within them. They think really, really fast. They're very quick. They're very on their toes, and they're very smart. You know what I mean? Geminis are very versatile. You know what I mean? Because they're a mutable air sign. So what does that mean? That means mutable communication, meaning that they can go here, they can go there, they could be there, they could be there. You know, they like to keep things going. You know what I mean? Very revved up energy. And they live primarily in their minds, and they live in kind of the dual energy of the mind, which is kind of like a back and forth. You kind of know when like you overthink things. Well, Geminis kind of live in that mindset all the time. They process information very, very fast, which is another reason why they are the sign of intelligence, because they can grasp something very, very quick. You know, just glance at something, boom, they got it. You know, one of the quickest signs of the zodiac. The Gemini energy is a very light energy. You know, if we're going to talk about the heaviness and the lightness of energy, Gemini is going to be the lightest energy of the zodiac, while Saturn or Capricorn energy is going to be the most heaviest, dense energy. Okay, so yeah, Gemini is going to be the lightest energy. So what does that mean? That means that Geminis, they don't take things too seriously, and they don't understand people that take things too seriously. They're like, huh? You're mad about what? What'd I do? What? I missed it. You know what I mean? Because they don't even think in that manipulative like mindset. You know what I mean? Geminis just, I mean, they are who they are. They're kind of like, they represent the child of the zodiac. And so there's kind of like this innocence about them that they're just like, what I do? What? You know, I don't get it. They don't understand why people are mad at them. They don't understand what they did wrong. You know, they're just buzzing their way through life, doing what they got to do. You know what I mean? So, um, yeah, that's something that like a water sign would be. They would kind of think that like a Gemini would be being manipulative, but they're really not. You know what I mean? Gemini is a sign of communication, so they love to talk. They love to talk about any and everything. You know what I mean? They'll chat it up with anybody. They'll chat it up with the old lady in the elevator, talk to her about her life, get out the elevator, chop it up with the security guard, talk to him about his life. Very free. You know what I mean? They like to talk to people, and they're very curious. They're interested in other people's lives. Really? How'd that happen? When was that? Blah, blah, blah. You know, they like to gather information. And they just want to know just to know. There may not be any reason behind them knowing this information, but they just want to know just out of curiosity. They don't need a reason. You know what I mean? So, Gemini is a sign of sharing information. Anything, like, you know, they like to talk on the phone a lot. They like to be social. They like to go anywhere that sparks their curiosity. Um, and also, they're very, very skilled persuaders as well. And that's why Gemini is sometimes called the sign of the trickster, because Geminis usually are very fast talkers too, and they're just fast, period. So they can pull something over on you, you know what I mean, if you're not careful. They're very persuasive, you know, they can usually get people to do things for them, and very crafty. You know, not saying that they have bad intentions or anything like that, but they're very crafty, and they know how to get things out of people. They're very skilled in that way. Socially, they're very skilled. So yeah, it is the signs of the twins, which means that Gemini can switch between yin and yang at any moment. You know what I mean? You could be talking to them, everything could be all good. You say something to disrespect them, and they switch to the dark twin like that. They're very quick with it, and you may get cussed out real quick and not know where it came from. Um, but overall, though, Gemini is not a really negative sign. You know what I mean? I don't want to put that out there like they're negative, because overall, they're pretty much a happy-go-lucky sign. They're usually in very good spirits. They're not really too much in tune with their emotions, because air is the opposite of water. Water is like super emotional. Everything is a big deal. Everything matters. Everything is taken to heart. And Geminis are very detached. You know what I mean? They're not in their feelings at all. They're just like, whatever, find the solution to it, move on. You know what I mean? They don't get too deep into stuff, and they don't like to get deep into stuff. As soon as somebody starts getting too deep and too emotional, they're like, okay, time to exit, stage left. Because Geminis, they have too much other stuff to do. You know, they got a place to go, they got a party to go to. They don't have time to be worried about somebody's emotions. You know what I mean? And it's not being that they are harsh, but Gemini is not an emotional sign. You know what I mean? So if you're dating a Gemini, and trust me, you know, there was a poll on Instagram about who the biggest heartbreakers were, and Gemini was like at the top of the list. You know, a lot of people feel slighted by Geminis and get their heart broken by them, but I think it's mainly because they don't understand that Gemini is not your emotional sensitive sign like that. That's just not who they are. They're very fun to be around. They like to have fun. They like to socialize. They like to talk. They love to laugh. And that's another thing. Geminis are extremely funny. Oh my God. They're like the most hilarious sign of the zodiac. Very funny, always cracking jokes. They have a way with words. You know, they're very crafty with words. So they're usually pretty good at writing, like writing music or writing poetry, anything that has to do with words and communication. They're very good at. They're very good at like coming up with slogans and sayings, because they have a way with words. You know, they'll just say something and you'll be like, how'd you come up with that? And they'll be like, I don't know, it just came off the top of my head. Because my mom's a Gemini, so I heard this my whole life. She would say the most outrageous things that I would never even think of, and it would be so hilarious. And I'd be like, where'd that come from? And she'd just be like, I don't know, it just came off the top of my head. They're very good. That's that Mercury energy. But yeah, like I said, a lot of people may feel slighted by them in relationships because they want a Gemini to be super emotional and to care about your emotions and stuff like that. But it's just not in a Gemini's nature to be that way. You know what I mean? And I see so many water signs getting in relationships with Gemini. And there's always this miscommunication, this like missing link between the two. And it's basically because a lot of people misunderstand Gemini's nature. Um, Gemini is another sign that it isn't very judgmental. They're very accepting. They're very open. You know, they don't discriminate. They're just cool with everybody. They're cool with everybody. You know what I mean? They make friends with everybody. They're not, like I said, they're not very judgmental. You're not really going to feel uncomfortable around a Gemini. You're usually probably just going to feel very welcome around them, because their energy is very, very light. Their energy is way up here. You know, it's a very clear, airy energy. So yeah, you're not going to feel judged around a Gemini. Very fun. The women, very hot commodities. I mean, a lot of men love Gemini women. I think a lot of men love Gemini women because Gemini women are easily relatable to men, because Gemini women have this like carefree, fun, kind of girly attitude, you know, and they're fun to be around, and they're just easy, you know, not sexually easy, but they're just easy to be around. There's no like, none of that kind of heavy, dominating, you have to do this or you have to do that type energy. Gemini girls are the kind of girls that can go hang with the guys. You know what I mean? And laugh it up and have fun. They're not going to be jealous of other girls. They're just going to be talking to their friends, having a good time. Gemini men, like I said, one of the biggest heartbreakers of the zodiac because, you know, Gemini men, it's very easy for them to meet women because, like I said, they're very communicative and they're funny. And every woman loves a funny man. You know what I mean? And so Geminis, I mean, they can pick up women like this. If they break up with a girl, they'll have a new girlfriend the next week. They make communications very easily. You know, like I said, they attract a lot of women. As far as Gemini men in relationships, sometimes they do come amongst some issues in their relationships because they're a little bit too carefree for a lot of women's liking. If you're a type of woman that just likes your man to stay home and watch movies with you and drink wine and stay home every night with the kids, Gemini, unless he's a more older, mature Gemini may not be for you because Geminis, they like to turn up, they like to have fun, and they like to be free. Okay, so just keep that in mind if you're dating a Gemini. I've dated a couple of Geminis in my lifetime too. You know, I've had my little fun with the Gemini males, you know, really fun guys. And so yeah, that's a little bit about Gemini. If you have questions, leave them below.